Hello, my name is Ashley Lubke, and I'm a student in SPC 683, Section 804 with Dr. Mugdal. Today is Sunday, February 23rd, 2025, and I'm going to shuffle my deck of cards. One, two, maybe, oops, three, and I will cut the deck in half. Adjust the camera so you can see me again. I have set a timer for 1 minute, and when I hit start, I will begin practicing the terms. Let's see if you could see here. All right, here we go. Ready, begin. A schedule of reinforcement in which the response requirements of two or more basic schedules must be met in a specific sequence before reinforcement is delivered. Chain schedule. An assessment method that includes gathering information from familiar parties. Indirect preference assessment. Stimulus change that follows a behavior of interest. Consequence. Vertical lines drawn upward from the horizontal axis to show points and times of which changes in independent variables occurred. Condition change line. Inadequate professional repertoire, difficulty problem solving and database decision making, inadequate supervisory repertoire, and ethical behaviors. Negative outcomes associated with lack of evidence-based supervision. Brief descriptions of the dimensions represented by each and scaled along each axis. Axis labels. Describes the behavior of making noises or sounds without social mediation. Vocal nonverbal. Single words or brief descriptive phrases printed along the top of the graph and parallel to the horizontal axis. Condition label. All right, I will set these aside and continue reading. Provide clear guidelines for their members to follow when deciding a course of proper action and conducting their professional duties. Ethical codes of behavior. Performance feedback to supervisors by their supervisees related to supervision. Upwards evaluations. Initial assessment of supervisee skills is critical for establishing clear goals for supervision. Interviews and direct observations serve as options for this initial assessment. Supervisee initial assessment. A behavioral effect associated with abrupt increases in ratio requirements when moving from denser to thinner reinforcement schedules. Ratio strain. Adhere to documentation expectations, participates in observations or rehearsals, responds professionally to feedback, meet performance expectations, seek clarification, provide supervisor with performance feedback, supervisee expectations. The environment in which something occurs, setting. Designed to evoke a specific imitative response and may include teaching a child to say a word, brush his teeth, or paint a picture. Planned model. State, provincial, or national government document that is established by law and specifies the privileges and limits of professional practice. License. A stimulus change that functions as a reinforcer and increases the frequency of behavior it proceeds as a result of evolutionary development. It does not rely on previous learning, history, primary unconditioned reinforcer. Covert events, typically accessible only to the person experiencing private events. Each behavior to occur in all settings. Sequential modification. Vertical line drawn upward from the left-handed end of the horizontal axis, aka ordinate, or the y-axis, vertical axis. An emotional reaction of anger or frustration, including operant behavior which injures or is otherwise aversive to the controller. Counter control. Variety of techniques for gradually transferring stimulus control with a minimum of errors. Errorless learning. A procedure in which a person compares her performance of a target behavior with a predetermined goal or standard, often a component of self-management. Self-evaluation. Provides physical assistance as needed by having the instructor remain close to the learner and provide more restrictive prompting only when the learner is not responding correctly. Used for skills which require physical assistance activities of daily living. Graduated guidance. Teach behaviors to occur with consequences which are likely to happen in the natural environment. Introduce natural maintaining contingency. Embrace the participants' values, expectations, traditions, and ideas. Cultural match. Skills are identified in sequence. Definitions for these skills should be developed and mastery criteria identified. Pass. Supervising goal setting. Voluntary credential issued by a private organization that is authorized by members of the profession, not the government. Professional certification. Teach behaviors across multiple stimulus conditions. Train sufficient exemplars. Reinforcement that requires the involvement of others. Socially mediated reinforcement. Describes communication through speech, vocal, verbal. When skills trained through behavioral skills training are tested in the natural environment to allow learners to contact contingencies described in training. In situ assessment. Develop, improve, maintain the behaviors of analytical and ethical repertoires. Utilize behavioral case conceptualizations, problem solving, and support seeking by the supervisee. Enable high quality service delivery, improvements in client outcomes. Positive outcomes associated with evidence-based supervision practices. Statements describing corrective disciplinary and revocation actions depending on the circumstances for violation of a professional disciplinary standards. Experimental design in which participants are presented with 2+ response options. Each option is associated with a distinctive SD and leads to a different set of treatment procedures. Concurrent chains design. 2D graph that shows relative distribution of individual measures in a data set. The points are not connected. Scatter plot. Behavior analysts are required to respect intellectual property laws by obtaining permission to use copyrighted or trademark materials and providing proper citations, attributions, or symbols, and refrain from unlawfully obtaining or disclosing proprietary information. Use of intellectual property. Use self-instruction, self-recording, setup cues. Mediate, generalize. The difference between the cost of a treatment or an intervention and the projected benefits, cost-benefit ratio. Allocation of responses to choices available on concurrent schedules of reinforcement. Rates of responding across choices are distributed in portions that match the rates of reinforcement received for each choice alternative. Matching law. A schedule of reinforcement in which 2 or more contingents of reinforcement operate independently and simultaneously for 2 or more behaviors. Concurrent schedule. An observer who is unaware of the study's purpose and/or experimental conditions in effect during given phase or observation period. Naive observer. Prior to preference assessment, potential tangibles that could act to increase future occurrences of behavior. Potential reinforcers. 2-dimensional graph with a logarithmic scaled y-axis so that the equal distances on the vertical axis represent changes in behavior that are of equal proportion. Semi-logarithmic charts. Straight horizontal line that represents passage of time, aka the x-axis, horizontal axis. Antecedent intervention that provides non-contingent access to preferred sources of reinforcement. Environmental enrichment. Allows the client to access the reinforcers that have previously maintained the problem behavior. Alternative behaviors. Consolidates, updates, and replaces the former BACBS professional disciplinary and ethical standards and guidelines for responsible conduct for behavior analysis compliance code. Occurs when the most salient component of a compound stimulus arrangement controls responding and interferes with the acquisition of stimulus control by the more relevant stimulus, overshadowing. An assessment method that includes gathering information via direct observation and manipulation of stimuli, including single stimulus, paired stimulus, multiple stimulus without replacement, multiple stimulus with replacement, and free operant preference assessments. Direct preference assessment. A stimulus change that functions as a punisher and decreases the frequency of behavior that it precedes as a result of evolutionary development. It does not rely on previous learning history. Primary unconditioned punisher. schedule of reinforcement in which reinforcement is contingent on a response being different in some specified way from previous response. Lag reinforcement. The ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Empathy. Written guidelines that provide direction for conducting the practices associated with an organized profession. Professional standards. Multiple component treatment package for reducing unwanted habits. Treatment typically includes self-awareness training involving response detection and procedures for identifying events that precede and trigger the response. Habit reversal. Terminal goal should reflect the reinforcement that matches the natural environment, maximize contingencies within the natural environment, as well as making consequences indiscriminable. Then reinforcement might include a child learning curse words from peers or how to sing a song on the radio. Unplanned model. Change a contingency of reinforcement by gradually increasing the response ratio or the extent of the time interval. Schedule thinning. Punishment that requires the involvement of others. Socially mediated punishment. Here is my graph to this point. I will graph my data from today, take a picture and submit that along with this video. Thank you.